Hello again. So today I'm going to be looking at making a guitar nut. So this particular one that I fetched off my current guitar has started to get a bit old, and what's happening is at the ends here, so the side where the strings come from, it's starting to get a bit splayed out. So what's happening in this case is the strings are vibrating against it. It's kind of, because there's a gap, the strings hitting either side, and it's making a sort of a buzzing sound. I'm going to make a new one out of a little bit of bone blank. Now, bone's generally accepted as giving a better sound than plastic, plus it's always better to make your own so that you can set the strings as you need to. You can buy them ready-made and they look like that and you just fit them in, but the problem with that is the distance of the strings from the fretboard might vary depending on your guitar, and also what spacings you want to use might change. So it's always better to make your own. It's not very difficult. So I'll go through the steps now and we'll get going. So first of all, you've got to get the old one out. Quite often they're just loose and they'll come out. Sometimes they've been glued in which case a bit of water along there, because you're assuming that it's going to be a water-based glue. If it's been epoxied in, then it's going to be an absolute nightmare to get out. So a bit of water along there, leave it for 10 minutes to let the water soak in, and then a gentle tap with a universal tool, very gentle tap, and against there in this sort of way, tap tap, and this one came out quite nicely, and there it is. Now you've probably got some glue and stuff left in the trench, so first of all I want to clean that up so that the new one's got somewhere to sit. So first of all, I've got a very tiny little chisel blade, only a cheap little thing, but it's good for just taking away some of this extra glue that you can see sticking up. I'm very careful. What I don't want to do is go inside to outside and risk splitting away any of this wood, so always going inside just to get rid of that excess glue. And the next thing, once the big chunks are out, I've got an assortment of these little needle files. You can pick them up for very cheaply from eBay and from Amazon. I'm just going to clean up. So this is a little square one, so it allows me to get in there, just clean up that excess. So here's a blank that I prepared earlier. You pick these up from eBay and from Amazon for next to nothing. I think this was about £1. Buy them in bulk, you can get them cheaper. So what I've done is just cut and sand it to the right size. So this is about 50mm long by about 10mm high and about 5mm thick. And what I can do is now I can take this and I can line it up with this, and we can see whether it fits or not. Now this is slightly thicker than the groove, so you've got two choices. You can either make the groove a bit bigger or you can thin this down. Probably better to thin this down rather than start adjusting the guitar. So that's what I'll do, and all we need to do is get that on a bit of sandpaper. It feels like it needs to lose like a fraction of a millimetre and it'll fit into that groove. So you can see here I've got some of this sandpaper, it comes off a roll, and then you can take this and then just holding it onto a very flat surface, you can just gently sand it away. Now this sands really quite quickly, it's made of bone, so it will sand quite quickly. So we can just now take that down a bit at a time, very carefully, a bit at a time, until we get to a point where it will fit. This sandpaper is like 80, so it's pretty rough stuff. So I want to go through it, getting a lot closer. Now as you're doing this, constantly just double checking that you're not making it unsquare. So you want it to stay nice and square, and just really take it off one side. That's very close now. We'll keep doing that until we get it to fit. Okay, so we've got to a point where this fits nice and snugly in that hole. It's nice tight fit, not wobbling around. So that's about ready. I can check down the sides just to make sure it's as deep as the fretboard on both sides. So what I'm going to do now is line up this one edge. I'm going to mark using a pencil where the edge comes to. Taking the mark, I'll use a little set square just to mark that off. So that's the length that I need. I'm going to try that again. Measure twice, cut once. Make sure that it's reaching the edge there and that looks correct. So now I'm just going to saw that off, and it's easy enough. Just saw that off using a hacksaw or any other fine tooth saw that you happen to have. So I've cut that now. What I've done is to cut it very, very slightly, like 1/2 mil over length, and then I can try it in the hole. I can feel it's a bit over length, and I can just use my sandpaper again to just take that down bit by bit until I've got the perfect length. And there we go. That is now the length. I can feel it fits in quite snugly. So there we are. We're now ready for the next part, which is shaping it and putting the string lines in. And the next job is to mark out where the lines are going to be. Now this is going to be higher at the bass side than it is at the treble side by about 1 millimetre. So the rule of thumb, it's about 3 millimetres you want initially at this end. So I've set 3 millimetres on the dial gauge, and what you do, I'm using this end, not the mouth end, because the mouth end it's hard to get in. This end, we can rest one on there and one on there, and we can carefully mark 3 millimetres. And do the same at the other end with 2 millimetres, and then we'll fetch it off and we'll draw a curve. Now as you can see, I've marked off both ends of the thing here. So next thing I'm going to do, I've got this piece of wood and it's just flexible, you can see. If I put one end on the 3 mil mark, one end on the 2 mil mark, what I can do then is just gently put a little bit of a flex in that and hold it with my hands, make sure it's in the right place, and then I can just draw a line, a nice curved line along that bit of wood. Okay, it's not particularly curved, but it's just a slight curve in it. Now I can double check that on the guitar again, so double checking absolutely everything. Put it back in place, and you can get a ruler this time just to double check that it's the right height before cutting anything. So now that I've double checked that that line is correct, what I'm going to do, put it into a vise with some soft jaws. If you've not got one with soft jaws, then clamp it in a normal vise with a couple of bits of wood. Put that along there, and then we can take a file and we can start to file that into the right shape. So here we go. We'll cut relatively quickly, so be careful not to go too far with it. So getting pretty close to the line now, making sure we're keeping it square, of course. And I think we are pretty much done on that one. So if I hold it up to the camera, you can see now it's got a nice curve, and we can now go and pop that back on the guitar, making sure to get it the right way round. Pop that back on, and as I said, make sure we get the right way. You'll still see there's a slight line on the top which shows the curved side. You don't want to be getting it upside down, really easy to do. So if you just leave a little mark, so you don't cut all the way down to the mark, or you make an extra little mark, you'll know which is the top, and that'll pop into there. And theory says, when I measure that, it should again be 3 mil at one end, 2 mil at the other. Once I've double checked that, what I like to do is then just tack it in place with a little bit of aliphatic resin glue. So here we go, this is the stuff that I use, Titebond, just aliphatic's the yellow glue. Now, don't be tempted to try and use epoxy or something, because if you do, as you saw before, you will never get it off again. You want something water-based, so at least you can put water along and get it back off again if you ever need to. Again, a little bit of wood, and then just adding a little bit of that glue. I don't need much, just to hold it in place. Of course, it will squeeze out a little bit when we come to push the thing in place, so not too much. There we go. That to one side. Take the nut, push that into place, make sure it's centered properly, push it down. You'll see a bit of squeeze out, if there is any squeeze out. Get a clean bit of clean bit of the wood again and just get rid of that. Much easier to get rid of now. And in fact, you can also get a very damp bit of cloth or tissue paper and just clean up any squeeze out if there's any significant. That's pretty much there. Okay. Double check it, that it's seated properly seated against the fretboard, down to the right depth, and then I'll leave that to set for a couple of hours. Okay, so now this has had a chance to dry. It's nice and firm. The next thing to do is start to think about adding the string slots. To do this, usually take a pencil. First of all, we don't want the strings too close to the edges. Too close, what will happen is they'll pop off and they'll be kind of on the edge when you're trying to play. Generally speaking, 3mm is a good spacing at first. So 1, 2, 3mm. So I'll mark those. So these are the sort of outer strings that I've marked on there. You can see that. Okay, next thing to do, we've got 6 strings. So what you do is measure that distance that's left, divide it by 5, not 6, divide it by 5. And the other way to do it, if you've still got the old one, you can hold the old one up against the new, making sure to get it the right way around, and then you can mark them straight from there. Just take them off like that. And that's what I'm going to do here, because I've got the old nut and it just makes it easier. Either way, they should come out to round about the same. So once these are marked, you need to start to file out the nut slots. Now, at this point, it's much better if you've got a set of professional nut files, but they're really expensive, so I don't have a set. If you've got the money, it's worth investing to do this properly. But I find I take a file which has got a square profile and sharp edges. And that way I can cut down and make V-shaped grooves initially, if you like, that I can put the strings in. And then you can take a variety of these different size and shaped files, depending on the string, to try and emulate the thickness of the strings. The really thin ones I can just use a V-shape and it'll be fine. So we can start off just very gently by filing these down, just at the marks you've made, as accurate as you can, and then just start to make a groove. You want a groove at this stage which is something that you can see and something that the string will just fit into. So what we'll do is loosely fit the strings into the grooves and then we'll see. Okay, so all the grooves are now filed, just very gently, just a small groove in each one. And then what I can do is I can put the strings on and just have a look to make sure the strings are where I expect them to be, and that nothing's out. So it's very easy to get the maths wrong, or we put the strings on and find you've put them too close to the edge, that kind of thing. So it's worth putting them on now, particularly if you've got old strings, because these are rather sharp edges still at the moment. And just try them, see if they look right and feel right, and if they do, we can then move on to the next step. Okay, so I've cut the grooves in the nut, and I've put the strings in, and I've tested that they're all in the right place by looking at them. Next thing to do is start to cut the frets a little bit deeper. And in order to do that, you need to put the string on and do some measuring. So what we need to do with this is the top string on. You hold down the string between the 2nd and 3rd frets. You should get a gap now between the 1st fret and the bottom of the string. And now that gap is what you need to set. So for each of these, you're going to file them down far enough that you get that gap. Now, for the top strings, the top E and the B string, you're probably looking at a gap of about 0.1 of a millimetre. It's really quite a small gap, but that needs to be slightly wider as you come up through the string. So the fatter strings, I'm going to use 0.5 for the top string, then 0.4, 0.3, 0.2, and so on. I can test this initially, and you can see I've got quite a big gap there. This is 0.5, so I've got loads of gaps, so I need to take this down a little bit further. Now for this size string, I've found a file that is kind of oval shaped, fits really well. Now obviously if you can afford to buy the proper nut files, then that's much better if you've got the right sizes. Otherwise you're going to fiddle around with different sizes of these things and find out which is the best. So what I'll do is loosen this off like that, and I can then just lift this off the side and I can use my file to carefully file away a bit of that hole. Now it's important to get the right width on the holes. If you get it too wide, then the string's going to flap about and cause a buzzing sound, as I said earlier. If it's too small, then it's going to be difficult to tune. It'll jam in the hole and it'll slip. So you've got to be a little bit careful. And for this, you've also got to be careful because the bone will file away quite quickly. So bring that back up to okay. Now we'll measure that again. So we're getting closer, but we've still got quite a big gap. So we'll do it again. And we'll keep going until they're all down to those right depths. Okay, so I've done all 6 strings now, filed them down so we've got these shrinking gaps. The next thing to do, bring it up to the right tune, give it a try. Have a feel of what it feels to play like, because we've allowed quite a bit extra on these top strings by going all the way to 1/2 mil. So if it feels like it doesn't play quite right and you want them to feel a bit lower, you can take these down. I wouldn't take them down much less. These very top ones are much less than maybe 0.2. You get to a point, if you go too far, they'll start to buzz and you'll have to start all over again. So it's a very sort of delicate operation. Just get it to the right feel. And once you feel happy with it, good to move on to the next stage. So we'll try this out. Quick string, slightly out of tune. It will slip when you put new strings on. It takes a while for them to bed in. But it feels about right. Yeah, that's about right. Let's move on to the next stage. Okay, so I've taken the strings off again. And the next step is to file all the corners round, really. These edges need to be rounded off here on the far sides, and then this back edge needs to be rounded off as well to give it that sort of classic shape. So if I start to do that, I prefer just a little flat file for this. So these edge ones, you don't want them to be too close to this edge, or you risk the string popping off. But otherwise you can just sand it down until it's a nice sort of shape. Now that I've rounded the edges a bit, the next thing is to start to file down the flat top. Now what we want to do is to get each string, and I've left the strings on at the other end, it needs to sit, I've got 2 there, the string needs to sit in the hole, in the gap, but not too deep. So we can take a little bit off this so that it brings it down. And if you've used a V-shaped file, this kind of hides the big V shape as well as it brings it back down. So that, see, the string's well down in there. Whereas if I look at the bass string, that's pretty much right. That's kind of, I can just about feel it above the level of the nut. So that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. So I can bring them all down one at a time, and then it's just these far ones here that are disappearing. So I can take a bit off there until I'm happy with that. You might need to just re-round these corners again if you take too much. So once you're happy with the way the strings sit in the nut, now it's time to file off this back bit here. So what we want is a nice rounded shape again. This takes a little bit more time to do, and you can get the bigger file, but be careful that you don't start scratching this. What you can do is get a little bit of tape, stick it on here, and it'll stop you from slipping with the file and damaging the woodwork. So once you've got the shape at the back that you're looking for, then you can round off some of these extra little corners that are there, so the whole thing is nice and smooth and rounded again. You might want to take a bit more of these corners here, but that looks quite good. Okay, And with my finer file, I'm just giving it a quick go over just to make sure it's smooth, take out some of those grooves. What we need to do now is looking at the edge that comes this way. Now these edges, obviously the string doesn't just go straight from there. What it does is it goes into the groove and then it goes off in one direction towards the machine heads. So I want to give that a very slight edge. Now what I'm going to do is get the file. Now I'm tilting it quite a lot because I do not want to damage this front edge at all, otherwise I'll have to start again. So with it tilted down, I can start to just file down that edge that on this side in the direction that the string's going to go in, and it'll just help it, and it'll stop there being any hard edges for the strings to lean on, because if they're leaning on hard edges then you might well get them breaking along there. But again, if you damage that front edge that's gone to the guitar, then you'll start to get buzzing strings and things, so it's be quite careful here. So just using the end of the file, and obviously you will have, by rounding this edge off, you will have taken a little bit off the groove anyway, so you want to make sure the groove is still there. And you can in fact splay it out a little bit on this side, not on that side, but on this side you can just give it a little bit of an exit channel, if you like, just so that there's nothing for it to rub on. So now the slots are cut and it's all rounded off. I've just got a little bit of sandpaper, so this is sort of 400, and what we can do is just give it a bit of a sand, and this will just polish it all and make it really sort of nice. 400's about what you need. And then finally what we'll do is get a little bit of 1000, and we'll just gently put it down those slots to make them really smooth. If they're really smooth, then it means the strings will be able to slide against them much more easily. So here we go with the 1000. It's actually 1200 because I couldn't find any 1000 in the box, but there you go, bit of that. You don't strictly need to do this, but nice to have a professional job. There we go. Make sure there's no marks left on it. So here we are, that's all 6 strings back on. You can see the shape of the thing that we've made. Come to the side, you see it slopes over at the ends, and it works quite well. So here we are, all fixed and ready to go. So I hope this video was useful. Please subscribe if you want to, or if not, maybe I'll see you next time.